back there. And I think there was a lot of emotion, a lot of weariness, a lot of just being tired, a lot of not feeling good. So I want you to close your eyes with me, and I just want you to take some really big, deep breaths. And I just want to welcome you. I want to welcome you if you are weary, if you are tired, if you are exhausted. I want to welcome you if you are battling your mental health right now. Mental health is, and there are some physical health illnesses that just, they feel so invisible. And I want to name those, and I want to name that struggle. I want to welcome you if you are stressed out, if you are worried, if you are anxious. I want to welcome you if you are in a place where you're missing people, if you are missing kids, if you are missing loved ones, parents, family members, friends, a partner. I want to welcome you if you are questioning, if you are doubting, if you are wondering, if you are in a season of trying to figure out what this world is all about. I want to welcome you if you are angry. I want to welcome you if you are lonely. If you feel like there's no one that understands, that there is no one to share in this world with you. I want to welcome you if you are happy, if you are celebrating, if you feel peace, if you feel contentedness. Collectively, I just invite you to just name whatever that is on your heart. And I want you to know that it's okay. Oh God. Oh God, I hope, I pray, I ask, God, that these walls would be safe, that this space would be safe. I pray for permission to be messy, to be tired, to be emotional, to be happy. I pray for connectedness here. I pray for a sense of community. And God, as we spend this little bit of time together, getting to sing some songs, getting to listen to music, getting to listen to a message tonight, getting to have some conversations, I just pray, God, that you would be in every moment, that we would find you, and when we find you, that we would find a friend, that we would find someone who loves us no matter what we are going through, whatever we've been through, that we would find someone who fills us up, who gives us one last drop of energy to make it through the day, one last drop of hope to make it through the season. Oh God, we love you. We are honored to love in this city. We are honored to be a light. We are honored to be hope. In your name, amen. The first song we're going to do is a song that Alyssa actually shared with me. I think we did it a couple weeks ago. It's a song called Hallelujah Anyway. I invite you to listen. If you would like to, you can sing along. If you feel comfortable, you can dance. We've got kiddos in here that love to dance, so they will definitely bring a little bit of joy. And as always, though, I know that in faith spaces and in family spaces that sometimes the presence of families can be triggering. And so I just want to honor those who are missing kiddos that are far away for whatever reason. It's a song called Hallelujah Anyway. If you haven't heard, I invite you to listen.
Strike a match, then
it's been around for a while. It's a song called Yes I Will. Alyssa brought it up today. Sometimes we plan really last minute and be authentic about that. I invite you that even if there is something that you are praising ahead of the promise, even if it is something that you don't see the way out, even if it's something that's being asked of you that is scary, to find a little courage today to maybe say yes. Oh, friends. Kiddos, you guys can go next door. Oh, they're staying. Okay, cool. God, I give you this next little bit. God, I just ask, God, that this space would stay safe. Speak through Christy. God, we are listening. In your name, amen.
What psalm are we going to talk about tonight? And I was like, well, we're not exactly going to talk about one psalm. We're going to talk about a concept from a lot of different psalms. So we're going to kind of call this a Psalms mashup tonight, and maybe even a little bit of a Psalms remix, if you will. And here's what I mean by that. Anybody ever had an experience where like you think you learned a lesson, or like you remember something this way, and then later on you find yourself in a similar situation and you learn new things, or you see different perspectives, right? So I had that experience this week. If any of you have heard me talk about this before, I apologize. Or if you've read my book, it's in there. There's this story about the waiting room. And I talk about this story a lot because it was really, really pivotal to me, right? And I talk about how I'm a really visual learner. And so sometimes hard concepts, I best understand them when I can relate to them. Anybody relate to that? Okay, so let me help you relate to the concept of waiting through this illustration. And then I'm going to tell you how it's kind of a remix. So the way that I normally tell this story, the way that I wrote about it, is that years ago, I thought it would be a good idea to have both Lynn and their older brother Bryson have surgery on the same day, because I thought we'll just get them both done at the same time, no big deal. And they were minor procedures, they were relatively routine procedures, right? But I'm in pre-op with both of them. They're both anxious and stressed, and I was like, this was a terrible idea, because like I couldn't give anyone their full attention. Everybody was anxious about their own things. And then it was time for surgery, and they said, okay, Mom, you go to the waiting room, right? And again, super routine procedures, but there was something in me as a parent that was like, I don't want to go to the waiting room. Like, I know that they're anxious. I know that they're scared. There were big emotions. There were tears, right? That separation is hard. And I talk about how sitting in the waiting room, I kind of had this moment where I was like, okay, let me be honest. I struggle a bit with being a control freak. I'm just going to be honest. I like to know what's happening. I like to make sure everything's kind of planned. And when you are in the waiting room, you have how much control? Zero control. None. And so I'm sitting in the well, actually, if I'm honest, I'm pacing in the waiting room, right? And I'm just kind of like going back and forth, and I'm looking out the window, and I'm watching the clock, because he told me it would only be about 30 minutes, so this wasn't going to be these were ear tubes. These were not a big deal. But it was anxious, right? And I talk about how never, ever, 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 ever would I have dreamed of just being like, okay, that's 31 minutes, your time's over, and just like barging into the operating room and looking at the doctor and saying, dude, what's going on? You said you'd be done by now. Why aren't you finished? Do you need me to help you? Right? But we do that with God all the time. We do that with God all the time. We say things like, God, I trust you. I give this to you. And then we don't like the answer or the wait. And we start to barge into the proverbial waiting or the operating room and say, what are you doing? You clearly need my help. Let me show you what this should look like. Anybody relate to that at all? So there was a lyric that we just sang in that last song. And it said this, it says, I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late. Do you think that God's never late? No, I'm serious. I'm asking, like in your life, have you ever felt like God was late? Me too. Like there's a lot of times, so like, sometimes I think, I'm all about worship music, but sometimes I think like we read a lyric and I'm like, hold on a second. Who gets to define that God's not late, right? And are we allowed to talk about that? Yes, we're most definitely allowed to talk about that. Because I think a lot of times when we get into spiritual spaces and we get into sacred conversation, it's like, oh, well, we don't question God's timing. We just trust it. And I understand that. I understand that trust and waiting go hand in hand. But you know what also happens in the waiting room? Anxiety, doubt, concern, worry, questions, right? And those are normal and natural when we are in a place where we've got a blind spot and we can't see it. So here's what I mean when I say a remix. Lynn, I'm going to pick on you a bit. So Lynn had to go to the hospital this week for some stuff. I'm not going to say anything else. That's all I'm going to say. Lynn had to go to the hospital this week for some stuff, and that required Lynn to go under anesthesia. And so we had to be separated again. Mom, you need to go to the waiting room, right? And even now, even through another set of relatively very routine procedures, right? We are like 10 years past that first waiting room lesson, and I found myself thinking about that lesson, right? I found myself going, okay, God, this is really funny because it's been 10 years and I'm still struggling with wanting to pace, right? But I feel like I understand waiting and trusting and all of those things. But one of the things that I realized is this: I paid more attention this time. I paid more attention to more of the subtleties of waiting this time. And so here's some things that I noticed from the waiting room. So this is your waiting room remix. Are you ready? So I noticed this time, number one, that there were a lot of different people who were waiting on different people, and everybody's wait was different, right? So like I knew that my wait was going to be about an hour this time. There was a woman that came in later as I was sitting there waiting on Lynn, and they said, your surgery's probably going to take about 4 hours. And I thought to myself, whew, dang, I'm glad I don't have to be in that waiting room, right? And then there was somebody else that was in the other room that I heard say, you should only be, 10, 15 minutes. This is a quick, easy thing. But let me tell you something. I guarantee you, I didn't ask, but I feel confident in making this guarantee. I guarantee you that the person who was waiting the 10 or 15 minutes had the same level of uncomfortableness as the person who had the 4-hour wait, as the person being me who had the 1-hour wait, right? It doesn't matter how long we're waiting. It doesn't matter how big the thing, right? Waiting is hard. Amen? Waiting is difficult. Being out of control is difficult. And so here's what I'd like to do tonight. I want to do a little bit of a different kind of experience for us tonight, okay? If y'all have been around TCG for any matter of time, you know that I am a big, big believer and a big, big proponent that I can't tell you what to believe. I can't tell you what to think. I can't tell you what kind of faith to develop. But what I can do is I can start some conversations. I can get the ball rolling on some things that you need to wrestle with. You need to think through. You need to process on your own, and you need to make it yours. You need to contextualize it, okay? That's one of the big problems, I think, with modern day church is we kind of treat it like a Xerox machine. Like, hey, if you come here long enough, you're going to pray with the same words that we use. You're going to listen to the same playlist that we listen to. You're going to wear the same skinny ripped jeans that we all listen to. You'll drink the same coffee. Like, no. God created us uniquely, and he has unique relationship with each of us, which means every conversation and concept needs to be dealt with individually, okay? So here's what we're going to do tonight. This is a little bit different than normal. I'm going to kind of do some back and forth tonight, okay? So I'm going to throw out a conversation topic, and I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to talk about it, okay? Just like little groups. Talk for just a few minutes. And then I'm going to pull you back in, and we're going to talk about a few more things, and then I'm going to send you back to talk again. And we're going to do that a few different times tonight. Does that sound cool? Okay. No. I can respect that. This is being challenged to come outside of your comfort zone just a touch. So here's the first one I'm going to give you, is that song lyric. I want you to grab a few people, and I want you to talk about, do you think that God, what is that concept of time, holy time, right? God being on time, God being late. What does that stir up in you when you think about that? Maybe some certain times in your life that kind of come up and you think about those. Maybe some emotions that come up when you think about God's timing that is bigger than what we can ever understand, right? And very seldom does God's timing line up with ours. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to talk about that, and I'm going to pull you back in, and we're going to go through some psalm mashups on the topic of waiting. Hey, Peter, you can pop over there with Bob and Dusty if you want. Hey, Bob. Peter's going to come over and help us. So here's what I want to do. I'll give you time to talk again in just a second. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. So typically, I don't like to preach on themes, okay? And here's why. Because I think a lot of times, preachers like to preach on themes, and they go through and they cherry pick verses, and it's like, here's this verse, and here's this verse, and here's this verse. And let me tell you what, if I've got enough puzzle pieces all dumped out, I can make a picture, right, of something. It may not be the picture that was intended, though. And so I like to look at passages most of the time, and I like to look at things in context. But for tonight's purpose, okay, if you'll allow me, I'm going to do things a bit more thematically than I normally do. There you go. Now you can hear me more. Ellie, we don't need your microphone. No, I'm just teasing. I'm totally teasing. Okay, so here are a few verses that I want us to talk about. I'm going to give you one to start with, okay? Psalm 27. I preached on Psalm 27 earlier this year. And Psalm 27 at the very end, the very last verse, has this really difficult, challenging verse at the end, okay? And we're going to revisit it tonight in the context of this conversation. Because it says this, Psalms 27 verse 14 says, wait for the Lord. Now, every translation stops there except for one. The New Living Translation, which I normally preach out of, adds the word patiently. That is the only translation of Scripture that I can find that adds the word patiently there. Wait patiently for the Lord, the New Living Translation says. Everybody else just says, wait for the Lord. Okay? Can we just stop there for a second? Because I think that's important, right? Because there's a different kind of waiting. You're right. So, like, here's the thing. Some waiting rooms, I'm going to be patient in, right? Other waiting rooms, I'm going to be frustrated in, and I'm going to be questioning, and I don't understand why this is having to drag out this long. I don't understand, because this could be done better. That's usually where my frustration comes in. As an Enneagram 1, a lot of times it's like, I could organize this better, and no one would have to be waiting this long. But it's so important, because I think sometimes when we throw in that word patiently, there is this belief that if we are believers in Jesus, our waiting should always look like this. Like we're happy and we're content to wait, and we're just like wonderfully meditative in our wait. Can I be honest? Like sometimes my waiting has had questions, and sometimes my waiting has had profanity, and sometimes my waiting has had me in the front yard screaming. I know Bob and I have both been in that place. Sometimes my waiting has had me sobbing. Like, waiting patiently looks different for every person. And patiently waiting is not necessarily always a sign of perfect faith. Questions can be a sign of faith. Sadness can be a sign of faith. Emotions and anger and frustration and all of those things can still be a sign of faith, because none of those things in and of themselves are wrong. It's what we do with them that becomes the problem, right? If I'm angry, I have to choose what I do with that anger, right? Like when I feel it, and I feel it a lot, right? What am I going to do about it? Am I going to yell and scream at someone who didn't deserve it and they have nothing to do with my anger? That doesn't make me feel any better, and it doesn't make them feel any better, right? Am I going to go on Facebook and rant and yell about it to see if that pressure valve makes me feel better? Sometimes. I'm usually going to have thought about it first and try to make it productive. What am I going to do with that emotion, right? So when Psalms 27 says, wait for the Lord, here's what it says next. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Can we just acknowledge that waiting is an act of bravery? Can we acknowledge that waiting is an act of courage? That I am willing to wait even if I don't fully understand it? I may be angry about it. I may have questions about it. I may get grumbly about it. But I'm going to have the courage to wait and trust that something's happened. I may not understand the timeline. I may not understand the way that you choose to move. But be brave, be bold, be courageous in your waiting. And then it finishes with this. Simply says, yes, wait for the Lord. Right? Not, yes, wait for the answer. Not, yes, wait for the flashy neon sign. Not, yes, wait for the $1 million check to come in. Yes, wait for the Lord. And sometimes the Lord's answer is not always the answer we want. Sometimes the Lord's answer and movement is not always the expectation that we had in mind. So, yes, wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage in waiting. And you know what? The only way to get better at waiting is to wait. It's to practice, and it's hard, and it's not easy. But it is courageous, it is brave, and it is incredibly, incredibly challenging. And it's often a season of incredible growth if we lean into that space. So I want you to talk about that in your groups for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back. And if you guys are online, feel free, I know Scott's in there chatting, feel free to talk with Scott as your group and kind of process these conversations together. All right, you guys, about one more minute on this question, then I'm going to throw another one at you. All right, you guys. So because of proximity here, I'm eavesdropping a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Sharita's group's up here getting into ethics and philosophy. And so Sharita asked the question, which I think is a great question. What's the opposite, right, or the alternative to waiting? So what'd you come up with? What was the answer?
Well, the alternative to waiting is to do action, but oftentimes action without the full opportunity for what we're waiting for to come to.
Okay. Anybody else got an answer? What would you say the alternative to waiting is that Sharita's posing, which I think is a fantastic question? I would offer that the alternative would also be giving up.
That's honestly what I was
and quitting, right? Yep. Yep. Because here's the thing, right? I think we've got two choices. We either wait, even if it's ugly, right? Or we say, forget it, I'm done. And I walk off and I don't know what's on the other side of the wait. And so many times, that's why we say it takes boldness and courage and strength to wait, even if it's ugly, wait, because you don't know what's coming on the other side. You don't know what the next minute, the next hour, the next week, the next month. And I don't say this in a prosperity gospel kind of way. I say this in a simply, we just never know when the change is going to come, right? We never know when the breakthrough is going to come. So Psalm 39, verse 7, okay, in our mashup, is the next verse that kind of touches on this. And it says this, it says, "And now, Lord, for what do I want? Because my hope is in you." What fuels our wait? Hope, right? The hope that something could change. The hope that things could get better. The hope that there could be breakthrough. The hope that there could be sobriety or housing or restoration or renewal or healing in a relationship. Hope is oftentimes what fuels our wait, right? Even when faith doesn't feel like it can fuel it, even when like our physical strength or our mental health doesn't always feel like it can fuel our wait by itself. Hope is this thing that whispers in the dark, I will not give up. Even if it is the last ounce of strength that I have, I'm going to use it to continue to hope. Because here's the thing about hope. Hope is perpetual. As long as you hope, it kind of just keeps building on itself, right? Like, okay, I got through that minute. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to get through the next minute. And before I know it, a day's gone by. And before I know it, we're into the week. And before I know it, I'm into a month. And the days start moving. Do you hear that? Do you see that? So here's my question for you. I'm going to give you a shorter period of time because I just want you to kind of popcorn with each other. What's fueling your waiting right now? What fuels your wait? Do you feel hope in your situation? Do you recognize it? Because that's something for all of us, right? Do we recognize what it feels like to have hope in our wait? All right, you guys. So when we talk about hope, when we talk about do we recognize hope and what does hope, she's okay, she's great. I have an assistant. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. For those of you joining us online, this is what TCG family is all about, and we love it. So, again, in our Psalms mix-up tonight, mashup, whatever you want to call it, okay, I point to Psalm 130, verse 5, in this conversation about hope, because here's what it says. It says this: I wait for the Lord, my soul waits. Now, I just want you to like close your eyes for a second and just like imagine that. My soul waits. Like, this isn't just I'm waiting on the clock. This isn't just my eyes are waiting as I scan the crowd looking for something. Like, this is that deep soul aching, waiting for something that our heart desires. Anybody relate to that? My soul waits. And in his word do I hope. In his word do I hope. Now, let me offer this, okay? Because in modern day church, a lot of times we hear in his word and we automatically think of what? The Bible. We think about scripture, okay? But David's writing these words before there was a Bible that was canonized and bound in leather and put a cross on the front of it, okay? David's writing these words recognizing that in his words do I hope. In the revelation of God, the fact that God is speaking, right? In relationship, God speaks, and it's not always like, hey, Christy, pay attention, do this, right? Like, it's not always. Sometimes it's just nature. Sometimes it's a beautiful sunset that just like stirs my soul and just like reminds me of how big God is. Sometimes it's seeing little kids dance and laugh and come sit up here, and just that reminder of innocence and excitement and what it would be like to have that much energy, right? Everything stirs our soul, and God speaks through everything if we allow him to, and that is what creates hope, right? So in that, find hope in all the things, because God moves and works and speaks through all the things. Okay, so here's the last psalm that I want to point out for tonight. I'm going to give you some time to discuss this, and then Holly and Alyssa are going to close this up tonight. So Psalm 37, verse 7 says this: rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Ugh. And it says this: don't fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of a man who carries out wicked schemes. Our waiting is not comparison. Our waiting is not a scorecard. It's not about who waits better, who waits longer, who waits stronger, who waits prettier, okay? Waiting is yours. It is unique to you, and it is not for you to compare with anybody else. Do you hear me? If you hear nothing else tonight, please hear that. That means that your wait and your struggle with whatever that is, right? When we talk about the gap between what is and what could be, okay? That could be sobriety. Your wait in that journey is going to look different than anybody else's, so don't compare your journey to theirs, right? Maybe that wait and that gap is financial. Your situation is different than anyone else's situation. You can't compare it to everyone else's, right? Maybe yours is health and being healthy and getting healthy. And you can't compare your particular set of circumstances and conditions with somebody else's and how they wait. That's not what it's about. Waiting is personal, just like faith is personal, just like love is personal, just like hope is personal. But let me say this: I am a firm believer that though these things are personal, they are not meant to be solo activities done in isolation. Because here's the thing: you were not created to wait alone. Do you hear me? Like, if you're in a waiting space and you feel like, I have to do this myself, I got myself into this situation, I got to wait it out, I got to strong arm myself through it, you are buying into a lie that seeks to weaken you and put you off by yourself. You are stronger when you are surrounded by other people who get that waiting is hard. When you get that it's not easy to wait and fight and struggle and be bold and courageous in those places. So here's another lesson from my waiting room this week while I was waiting on Lynn. I was like, oh, Hudson crashed. I was in solidarity with Lynn, which meant I hadn't had anything to eat or drink, which also meant coffee. And if any of you know me, you do not want to hang out with me if I've not at least had a cup of coffee. And so, I mean, by the time we got to 11 a.m., my head was pounding. Like, I was not a happy camper. And I'm also just going to be really honest, I'm a coffee snob. Okay, I just am. And so there's certain brands of coffee I won't drink. I won't drink McDonald's coffee. Sorry, McDonald's. But I also won't drink Folgers coffee, mostly because like it just makes me sick. So anyway, I know, I recognize that that's privileged and snobby, and I name it, and I'm sorry. But there was only Folgers coffee in this waiting room, and I was like, okay, am I going there? I don't know, it's not that bad yet. And so Holly texts me, and Holly says, I can only imagine that you need coffee. And Hudson and I are on our way with coffee. And so Holly shows up, and Hudson brings his cars in, and they bring me coffee, good coffee. And they waited with me for the last few minutes, right? Everybody needs waiting room people. You need people. Whether they're going to bring you coffee or chocolate, or they're just going to sit with you and watch cruddy Weather Channel TV. Why is that what's always on in the waiting room? I don't understand it. But anyway, whatever it is that waiting looks like, you don't have to do it by yourself every time. Do you hear that? Because people that genuinely love you, high mountaintops and low valleys, they're going to bring coffee to your waiting room. And they're going to be there on the days that are good and on the days that are bad. And if you're one of those people who thinks, I don't need people, I'm fine all by myself, you're wrong. Sorry to burst your bubble. And you need some waiting room people that you can talk to, that you can process through things, that are safe people for you to yell and scream and curse at, and just not that it's their fault, but you just need to get it out. You need those people in your life because God didn't create you to do life alone. So I want you to take a few minutes in your group and talk about, what does that look like to have people in your waiting room with you? Is that scary? Do you have people in your waiting room? Do you lock the door of your waiting room and say, nope, nobody's getting in here? Talk about that for just a minute. All right, guys, I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes with this question while I finish coloring this flower up here with Shug. You think so? Okay. Okay. All right, you guys. You got a little extra time because Shug said they need another minute. So she said you should tell them I said that. So just so you know. All right. So I think what's important, and I heard some of this up here, right? Waiting room, being a waiting room person or having waiting room people, right, doesn't mean that like you've got to get it right every time. It just means that you're willing, right? And if you've got an expectation of people in your waiting room, you better articulate that, or you can't be mad at them when they don't show up, right? Which means if you've got a need and you're in a waiting space, then call your people and say, I'm struggling. I'm in a waiting space and I need some energy. I need some encouragement. I need some people to know that I'm not okay. The other day, Sharita texted me and said, I just need someone to know that I'm at home sick. Like, I wasn't in a place. I was on the other side of town with nieces and nephews. And I'm like, I can send you funny memes. I can do you need me to send you chocolate? What do you need? And I just need someone to know that I'm not feeling good. Okay? So if you're in a waiting space, talk about it with people. Don't internalize it and invite people into that space with you because that's incredibly important and that's a whole key of building community, right? Is that we can't just expect that it's going to happen. Like, oh, I have a need, people shall appear, right? I have a need, I need to ask for help. I need to say that I need people. I need to put myself in a position where I seek people out and I get uncomfortable and I come and try new things and I connect to new people. That's what it's all about. All right, I know waiting's not fun, but guess what? Every single one of us, if we went around this room, we're all waiting on something. Waiting is always going to be a fact of life. It's always going to look different. It's always going to feel different. No two circumstances, even in our own life, are ever going to be exactly the same. But it is one of those topics that we can all relate to because it is just a piece of who we are. So I'm going to invite Holly and Alyssa. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite Holly and Alyssa to come up here, and they're going to lead us in one final song. And I just want you to listen to the lyrics of this song as they lead us in these words, because I think this idea, when we feel like we're waiting and we feel like we are drained, sometimes we just want to curl up, right? I just want to curl up. I want to hide from the world. But I think these lyrics of this song kind of challenge us. Don't give up. Don't stop fighting. Don't hide. You've got to rise up. You've got to move. You've got to do something to be part of the change that you want to see in your own life and in the world around us.
right, friends. So we typically end our gathering together with some top three. I'm going to do the first top two, and then Christy's going to come share the last one. First of all, we always say there is lots of pizza over there, so please take some with you. Please eat some more. Help yourself. Take an entire pizza if you have someone to share it with that could use it, please. The first one is our Monday night discussion group. So every Monday, if you've never been to one of our Monday night discussion groups, we have a thing called Coffee and Questions for the adults, where we come here, we just have a chance to talk, and any question is welcome, any conversation is welcome. We literally sit in a circle, drink coffee, and talk. That's what Coffee and Questions is what it's called. Recently, this season, we now have a teenage version that happens at the same time in the garage. So Lynn hangs out with Rue, our cooperative youth group director, in there, and they do a very similar thing, but it's teenage style and it's teenage energy. I think it's a little shorter, and they have more like games, like book ending it. So those are Monday nights, 6:30 to 6:30, right? 6:30, right? Okay, 6:30 to 8. I was like second guessing myself. Secondly, we have, if you guys are not aware, I help lead our Family Connection program, Meets Next Door. It's a program where we love and support on families that are in the foster care system and while they're supervising visits. Super exciting news. Brentwood Church has partnered with us, and they have a site now at their church, and they just launched last week. So that's spreading, which is beautiful. But we desperately need volunteers. So we have a couple of informational calls this week. And so those calls are online, so they're on our Facebook events. That'd probably be easier to connect to that. But I know that we have a conversation on Wednesday night, and then we have one Thursday at lunch. So I'm not going to say the times because I'm going to probably get those wrong at the moment. But jump on our Facebook, or if you're interested, come and talk to me or Christy later. And we're just talking about the program and what it's like to be involved. So I'll let Christy talk about the third one.
Okay, so last announcement. Next week is going to be a different kind of week here, but it's a really important week, okay? So we are going to call a TCG family meeting. We got some stuff we need to talk about, okay? We're coming into cold weather season. I know that can be hard and can be really scary for a lot of us that are part of our TCG family, and we want to make sure that we are processing through some changes and some adjustments that we all need to be making to make sure that everyone in our family is as cared for and safe as possible in our current city structure. So we're going to have a family meeting next week. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. We're still going to do dinner at 5, but instead of a normal traditional gathering service, sermon, worship kind of thing, we're going to do more of a conversation. We'll do some questions. I'll give you guys lots of time to process things, and I'll answer as many questions as I can. Okay, does that sound good? So family meeting next Saturday with dinner, and I will probably bring us chocolate because I think that is always important when we have to talk about things that are hard and scary. So I will see you guys back next week. Have a wonderful week. Let us know if you need anything.